I thank the chairman. My Democratic colleagues want Americans to believe that the Supreme Court at any moment is poised to overturn the opinions in Obergefell and Loving. I cannot help but be thankful that we don't have to have a ethics inquiry because of all of the space that Justice Thomas is taking up in the heads of my Democratic colleagues. He's living rent-free and not paying for that rent, but he's certainly living in the heads of my Democratic colleagues nevertheless. He wrote a concurrence. Justice Thomas wrote a concurrence. And in that concurrence, Justice Thomas wrote, after overruling these demonstrably erroneous decisions, the question would remain whether other constitutional provisions guarantee the myriad rights that our substantive due process cases have generated. For example, we could consider whether any of the rights announced in this court's substantive due process cases are privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States protected by the 14th Amendment. In other words, he simply questioned the how. He simply questioned the how. And he did so in a concurrence. But at the same time, in the majority opinion, there are numerous specific mentions by the majority suggesting that the majority had no interest in touching those cases. In Dobbs, the court stated that Obergefell and other substantive due process precedents are, quote, inapposite to the asserted right to an abortion. And the Dobbs opinion, quote, does not undermine them in any way, unquote. Just in any case, anyone is not clear on the meaning of, quote, does not undermine them in any way. The court later reiterated that Dobbs' decision should not be, quote, misunderstood or mischaracterized to cast doubt on precedents that do not consider abortion. The court condemned the alarmist idea that Dobbs would lead to the overturning of the other cases as, quote, perhaps designed to stoke unfounded fear that our decision will imperil those other rights. And it is that unfounded fear that brings us here today. There is no threat. My colleagues are here for political messaging. We're here because it is July of an election year, and we're going to be adjourning in 2 weeks. And then inflation is at a high of the last 40 years, that inflation is at 9%, that our borders are wide open, and our Texans and the people across this country are exposed to wide open borders. You know, the median age of an American is about 38 years old, and that means that more than half the country wasn't even alive the last time that inflation was at the levels we currently see. And we're here because my Democratic colleagues have no answers to that, and so they want to strike fear in the American people. Unfounded fear, I would add. And I would note that my colleague from Rhode Island referenced the so-called Defense of Marriage Act. Well, that so-called Defense of Marriage Act was voted for by none other than President Joe Biden, Senator Patrick Leahy, Senator Patty Murray, Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Bob Menendez, Senator Chuck Schumer, Representative Steny Hoyer voted for the Defense of Marriage Act. Representative Ben Cardin, Representative Jim Clyburn, Representative Elijah Cummings, Representative Rosa DeLauro, Lloyd Doggett, my colleague from Texas, a host of others. I think we know why we're here. I think we recognize that we're here for political purposes. And I would note in closing, Mr. Chairman, that the rhetoric of codifying Obergefell or codifying Loving is not even true. The legislation put forward would do no such thing. The legislation put forward would force states to recognize marriages across state boundaries, which might be a laudable policy goal that we could debate. And I must side note, just thank my colleagues for recognizing the importance of the democratic process, that we're here as the people's representatives having a debate about policy rather than looking to the Supreme Court to make policy. Suddenly now that the court doesn't issue an opinion that my colleagues favor, but that it is noteworthy that the legislation put forward would not codify Obergefell and would not codify Loving in the clearly unlikely or unforeseeable case that the court were to take up a case and strike either of those down in the clear clamor for such a thing across the states, I say, obviously, with some degree of sarcasm. And I yield back.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your testimony.